Previously on Captain Robb's Trek Logs.
The line in the sand is drawn from here on out. No more discovery. Yes, Tom.
We have orders from Admiral Andre. We must review the next episode of Star Trek Discovery.
He tied me down to a chair. He taped my eyes open. He made me watch this abomination.
I wouldn't have to tie you down if you just did it of your own free will.
I wake up, and I'm still watching Discovery. Every minute I watch it, I get weaker. And every minute Discovery fans, they get stronger. I couldn't believe it. A man of his character. But now, I know what must be done. At first I thought they handed me the wrong dossier. I couldn't believe this man liked Discovery. He was being groomed for one of the top slots in the corporation.
Captain, sir?
I told you I didn't want to be disturbed.
We've got orders to change course. We're heading towards,
Keep the ship moving. That's an order, Lieutenant.
I think he's starting to crack.
Huh? Oh, you mean the Discovery thing? Nah, he's fine. He's fine. I think he's over it now. Trust me. All he needs is a couple days, a nap, a bottle of scotch. He'll be fine.
I'm gonna check on him just in case. We're still going?
Yes, we're still going. Because I finally figured it out. The only way to stop Star Trek Discovery is to stop Admiral Andre.
We have cleared the shuttle bay doors.
Man, I'm telling you, it's the little differences.
Like what?
Well, first, at McDonald's on Romulus, they use the metric system, so it's not a quarter pounder with cheese.
What the hell do they call it?
They call it a Rihan with cheese.
Rehan with cheese?
Yeah, a Rihan with cheese.
Why is it still with cheese?
Romulans don't got a word for cheese.
Oh, shit.
And check this out, you don't get it with a Coke.
They don't got Coca-Cola on Romulus?
Nah, man, you get your Rihan with cheese with a Tarka.
Tarka?
Yeah, man, a Tarka.
What the hell kind of shit is that? A Tarka?
Some fruity drink they make, and no ice. You drink it hot.
So hold on. I can't get a Coke to wash down my Rihan with cheese. I gotta drink a hot Tarka?
Yeah, man, ain't that something?
Captain, we're arriving.
Buckle up, man, this is where the fun begins.
Trust this guy. I heard some things, man. He's got a bad rep.
I told you, this guy is legit. This ain't no trade dispute. We don't need no pussy-ass Vulcan shit, right? This is the guy who's gonna help us.
Help us do what?
Help us take down Star Trek Discovery. And we do that by taking down Admiral Andre.
What now?
You have entered my domain. Now prepare for the arrival of Doomcock.
Captain, incoming message.
Intruder alert on Deck 8. Enter authorization code. Command functions are offline. Automatic defense procedures initiated. Diagnostic complete. Sensors are functioning normally.
Welcome aboard for another transmission of Captain Robb's Trek Logs. We are coming to you from the final frontier aboard the USS Midnight's Edge. After darkness, I guess. Well, with us, as always, is our stalwart crew, Mr. Lieutenant Commander Tom Connors.
Howdy, Captain.
Oh, I'm doing just fine. Unfortunately, Admiral Andre cannot beam in via subspace this episode, but we do have returning to the bridge, and she has just received a promotion to Commander. We have Commander Ren from Ren Rants.
Happy to be here, sir.
Happy to have you here as always. Actually, a lot of stuff has gone down in the world of Star Trek. A lot of stuff to talk about. We've got a new episode of Discovery. Discovery's back. But let's dive in actually some news. We didn't talk about this on the After Dark podcast because we wanted to cover it here. It appears that This Quentin Tarantino thing is starting to pick up some steam. And for those who haven't heard, and this comes to us from Vanity Fair, Paramount is taking that whole go boldly where no man has gone before ethos quite seriously. The studio is moving on Quentin Tarantino's R-rated Star Trek at warp speed, now tapping the Revenant screenwriter Mark L. Smith to join the team, according to Deadline. As Deadline points out, they make for an interesting odd couple. Tarantino, who usually writes all its own scripts, is known for stuffing scenes with a rat-a-tat-tat dialogue, while The Revenant was often wordless, opting instead to let the harsh frontier and violence do all the talking. But Smith also reportedly became a studio favorite after writing Overlords, an upcoming World War II thriller produced by J.J. Abrams' Bad Robot Company. Dum-da-dum-dum. Abrams will also produce Tarantino's Star Trek movie. So guys, let's start with Ren. What do you think?
I don't know. It's not like Quentin Tarantino is a hack. He's good at what he's good at. It's just I've never pictured him as someone I would envision being good at directing Star Trek. I don't know. I'm worried that Star Trek Discovery is so obviously Star Trek trying to be Game of Thrones, and I feel like this is also going to be more Star Trek trying to be something it's not, which is dark, edgy, shock value instead of optimistic, interesting stories. And Star Trek movies already are pretty hit or miss. I don't know. I'll give it a chance, but I'm definitely not optimistic.
Lieutenant Commander, what do you think?
When I first heard about this and we reported it on the After Dark podcast, I was all for it because I'm a huge Tarantino fan. And at this point, I think you even said it, how much worse could it get? And from what I've heard, he's kind of drawing a lot of inspiration from a few, or at least one specific TNG episode, and we know he's a big fan, and I know he's in tune with what made Star Trek popular probably, so I'm not too worried about that. And the fact that Paramount would let him go forward with an R-rated Star Trek movie really surprises me as far as Mark L. Smith being involved. Frankly, I think he's probably just going to come up with an overall structure, and if Tarantino is really going to direct and not just be involved in some producerial and writing aspect, he's still going to come in and probably punch up the dialogue. That's a given. I'm not really as worried as you guys are, I don't think, because like I said, at this point, how much worse could it get?
That's true. Really? It can't be worse than what we've already gotten.
He could do something unique, and he has a way of making his films. So I have a feeling he'll have ways of hearkening back to the things that will feel Star Trek in a lot of ways, at the same time adding a few new things and maybe some new perspectives. And I don't know as far as like what cast they're actually going to use. There's been all kinds of talk about that. We have no clue though as far as for sure. All we know is this is a big step forward for something that at first seemed like a very that's funny, that'll never happen, to wow, they're actually taking this shit seriously. Rob, what do you think about it? I know you kind of bounced around on the idea.
Well, I'm not that big a Tarantino fan. I saw Kill Bill, and the only thing that came to mind was I've seen plenty of 70s kung fu movies. I don't need to see a bad imitation of one. I have no idea what to expect at this point. Like you said, trying to be edgy and dark and edgy and modern is what got us Star Trek Discovery. I don't want to see more of that. The episode that Tarantino references for being the inspiration is called Yesterday's Enterprise.
Oh, I actually do love that episode.
Yeah, it's a really good episode where there's a photon exchange and there's a rift in space-time, and the Enterprise C comes through the rift and it alters the Enterprise E's timeline, and where they've been at war with the Klingons because the Federation did not come to the aid of the Klingons. I'm doing this all from memory, so I'm going to get some details wrong. Klingons, because what happened was the Enterprise C never sacrificed itself when it came to the aid of the Klingons that had been attacked by the Romulans. And so that caused a shift in the timeline in Picard and the Enterprise E's timeline, where they were at war because Klingons didn't take too well to that.
And where Tasha Yar was alive because they never encountered the crystalline entity.
Yes.
And then Tasha Yar goes back on the Enterprise C.
Yes, and then that sparks a whole thing with her daughter, and it gets pretty convoluted from there on.
That was a little cheesy, honestly. I wasn't the biggest fan of some of their follow-ups where, who's the secret bad guy? It's always Tasha Yar, or Tasha Yar adjacent.
This kind of reminds me of when Vince McMahon ripped the hood off. It was me, Austin! It was me all along! So, I didn't see The Revenant, so I can't say anything about that.
I wasn't a huge fan, but I can, like I said, that's where I can see that the structure may come from this guy, and then Tarantino will just put his spin on it, basically, is what I'm thinking.
I thought The Revenant was good, but I wouldn't watch it a second or third time.
Right.
So, I don't know. A lot of movies go through the planning stages. They get to the writing board. They go to pre-production. They never get made. So, we're going to have to see how far this goes. But I wouldn't be surprised if they go to pre-production.
At this point, with the mess that Star Trek Beyond was at the box office, don't get me wrong, I didn't have any issues with it, but I just don't.
I still have to see it.
Oh, well, it wasn't that bad. I thought it was pretty good.
It's not a bad movie.
The middle one was so bad that I didn't even bother to give it a chance, to be honest. Which, to be fair, I should know better. Star Trek movies really are hit or miss, and they seem to go like, okay, bad, okay. I'm not willing to say great, bad, okay, at least recently, but...
Every other Star Trek movie is good, it seems like.
Exactly.
Yeah. But regardless, since that didn't do well, I could see Paramount taking a chance on an R-rated Star Trek. They've already been taking a chance on Discovery. They've tried to capitalize on all the controversy they spawn with that, with the F words and the gore and the sex and the violence and the...
Klingon boobies.
Yeah, speaking of, we might as well move into a little Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah.
What do you say, Captain?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, anyway, if you're interested, let us know what you think about Quentin Tarantino's possible R-rated Star Trek in the comments below. Excited, not excited? Tell us what you think. Well, moving on, Star Trek Discovery has returned, and just like an STD, which it is named for, it just won't seem to go away.
Oh, sir, it's supposed to be disc.
It's supposed to be disc. Yes. Yeah. No. It's
or
STD.
disco.
Gosh. Yeah, they really didn't think with the naming. That was a bad life choice.
The Bee Gees are pissed.
You didn't want it to be called STD. You should have thought of that. Okay, you knew that people were gonna go there.
So the episode Despite Yourself.
Despite Yourself. Brief recap. We finally learned where they went at the end of episode 9. Into the forest I go. Where did they go?
The mirror universe.
Yes.
Oh boy.
Oh, brother. Oh,
and I really wished I had watched Mirror Mirror in prep for this, but just couldn't find the time. But I know there's a ton of references, so I just wished I would have been able to point them out. But anyway, yeah, Rob, go ahead and get into
Mirror
the
Mirror is my favorite, one of my favorite episodes. Not for nothing. I really do love Mirror Mirror. But so they find out they're a long way from home. They scan the wreckage that they're in. There's a trace of a Romulan and Andorian remains in one of the ships, and they are fired upon by a Vulcan ship, and they are contacted by another ship from the fleet, but it has a different quantum signature. Ooh, I wonder what that could mean. And so they contact the ship. The other ship fires, destroys the rebel Vulcans, and they piece it together that they are not in Kansas anymore. They're actually in an alternate, what do they call it? Alternate parallel dimension or universe, as they called it. And it turns out it is the same one from the classic episode Mirror Mirror, where it is not the United Federation of Planets, it is the Terran Empire that is ruling the galaxy. And it just okay, in all fairness, it does get a little better. We see some good character moments with Dr. Culber and with Stamets and with Tilly and with Captain Lorca, but it quickly goes downhill. We see Ash Tyler preparing for the
Vok reveal.
Yes, we called this shit. Okay,
oh,
we
so
called
obvious.
it. It's so obvious.
Everything. We called the alternate dimension bullshit.
Dr. Culber said he has scar tissue around his major organs, and this was after he had some kind of PTSD episode.
Like they reconstructed your bones.
They reconstructed your bones. Oh.
Yeah. They made your arms and legs shorter.
They took somebody else's body and they inserted something that shouldn't have been there.
Ooh, I wonder what that could be. You think
they transplanted something else into his body.
Oh my god.
I'm assuming that basically, they took Vok's mind, I'm sure, and found a way to conform it to human and all his other major parts that make up who he is, but they made them human.
Well, what they said was they put another personality on top of someone else's.
I'm thinking, okay, you guys have both seen Men in Black, right?
Yeah.
Remember the Edgar suit?
Yes.
I think this is an Edgar suit.
Oh my god, yes. Yeah, that does kind of seem like some part of what it is. I think they probably just took his brain and spinal column or something and hauled it over.
They found a guy, like, there was an Ash Tyler, a real Ash Tyler.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just took his body and put basically like an Edgar suit over top of
Yeah. And then they have that obvious scene with Laurel basically spelling it out for everyone.
Okay.
Exactly.
There's no security officer in the brig? Really? No.
Yeah.
There's no security on this ship at all? Really?
Yeah, where's there's cameras and shit, we know this, right?
Oh, and can we talk about how Ash Tyler casually fucking murders? It's not addressed at all for the rest of the episode. No one finds the body or says anything. He just kills him in an instant and walks out, and it's like, oh cool, guess it's this kind of
like,
show.
Nobody's gonna notice,
awesome.
yeah.
That was ridiculous.
There's only one person working in sick bay.
Yeah. Where are the nurses? Who's that other doctor that Stamets was supposed to be assigned to? Where's that person? I'm sorry, are there other doctors? We don't see any in this fucking episode. Ugh.
Even McCoy had Nurse Chapel, and Dr. Crusher had Nurse Agawa.
One sneaky thing I thought was funny, though, speaking of original series references, I thought it was cute when Lorca poses as the chief engineer and then does a Scottish accent. That was kind of cute.
So, okay, we haven't even gotten to the big reveal about how Lieutenant Tilly is actually in the Mirror Universe. She is commanding the Discovery. And Michael Burnham is presumed dead, or is our good friend...
And former Shinju commander, yep.
Or as our good friend Dictor Van Doomcock calls her, Mikey Spock.
Mikey Spock.
She's commanded the Shinju, and she's presumed dead. And they use it as a cover to get on board the Shinju. And, there's that big touching scene between Mikey Spock and Ash Tyler. Oh, you can trust me. You can trust me. I'm like, oh, yeah, you're going to set this up to make it even more of a letdown, aren't you?
I'm going to do a video, and I'm going to karaoke the song Photograph by Def Leppard. It's going to be that scene over and over again, but instead of Photograph, I'm going to sing Telegraph.
So anyway, Tilly has to pretend she's the commander of the Discovery. They get on board the Shinzu. Lorca ends up in the Agonizer suit. Somebody tries to kill Mikey Spock, and
she has to kill him back. The same guy she watched die in the first episode.
And we see Emily Coates, who I call Lisa Left Eye. And first of all, I have to give a shout out to Emily Coates. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Actress. She plays Keela Detmer. And we finally found out this character has a name. The redhead, she has the cybernetic implant over her left eye. On the Star Trek Twitter feed, there was a tweet that says, why don't you get to know Emily Coates, follow her on Twitter as Keela Detmer for your favorite bridge officer. And I said, this character has a name. I was just calling her Lisa Left Eye. And to her credit, she tweeted back, haha, have to admit, Lisa Left Eye is pretty catchy.
Somebody's
gotta give it up to
crush. Somebody's got... Sorry, Cab.
Hey, why wouldn't she have a crush on me? Hey!
Right.
But like I said, I have to give it up to her. She at least has a good enough sense of humor to roll with it. So, big ups to her. If you're out there, Emily, if you're listening, hats off to you. So it leaves off, and there's a big thing. Now, they're in the mirrored universe. They have to find out how to get back. And I think they have to find the USS Cooper, or whatever was called, I believe, which is a Constitution-class ship that crossed into the mirrored universe before. Now they have to find out. That's the key to getting back. Okay. Impressions. Tom, you first.
I actually got really into the first half of this episode, to the point where when I actually thought this episode was wrapping up, I was like, oh no, I want to keep going. I want to know what's going to happen. Well, it didn't. I realized I hadn't gotten to that point yet. It'd only been about half the show, because so much had happened. I actually thought it was near the end of the episode, though, because we actually got to get to know these characters a little bit better. I felt like Michael Burnham wasn't a bitch through the first half of the whole show.
Oh, I actually really liked some of Michael's scenes. I actually even liked her in the second half when she's having to play this, bad Michael. That was kind of fun. I kind of enjoyed her this episode. The writing wasn't nearly as bad as it usually was.
Right.
There was a weird pacing issue that the first 20 or 25 minutes went by very quickly. It was very well paced, and you didn't even realize.
But they were jam-packed with shit.
Yeah, and you didn't realize that how much time had gone by, and then it just ground to a halt.
We've always brought up the characterization on the show, and I pointed out to Rob right before the show too, and I said, this is the first time we've ever had an episode where they've actually brought up their characterizations as a point in the show, and they've actually had a little bit of character up to this point because they actually have to act how their mirror universe images would act, so they actually have to adjust their character, so their character is actually brought up, you know?
I thought we got this really great, really subtle moment with right after she kills that crewman in the turbo lift at the second half of the episode, and she's obviously traumatized by first watching this man die and now killing him herself with her own 2 hands. Then she immediately has to pull it together because the door comes open and he falls out. And I thought that that was one of my favorite scenes with her, and I was so surprised, and I almost forget what a great actress Sonequa Martin Green actually is when she's given something to work with.
Right.
I will give it up. That was actually a good scene. I will give it up to that.
I think they were listening to us, or at least a lot of fans like us who enjoyed Tilly to this point and gave her a big focal point this episode.
Oh, that was so fun. I loved seeing Captain Tilly, actually. Yeah. She was kind of great.
There were things that you could pull out of this episode that were pretty good. Anyway, let's go to Ren. Your overall impressions of this episode.
Definitely not my least favorite episode so far. I would probably put it in my top 3 or top 5 thus far. I enjoyed it the most out of a lot of the episodes I've watched recently of this show. I thought that it had a lot more to pull from in terms of good things, and I thought some of the bad things were a little less bad than last season. It's still not great. It has some major flaws, and I really think that the plot they're setting up with Dr. Colbert is just going to end up being convoluted and cheesy, and so there are things about it I definitely didn't like. I don't know, I'd say I'd give it like a 6 or 7 out of 10, like a B+, right, if I had to grade it. Not great, not terrible.
Well, and that's one thing I didn't really get to say. You know, the last half for me did go completely downhill, so I went from this high on the first half of like, I'm getting into this, you know, I'm actually getting into the show, to this huge drop off in the last half where everything had to basically be put back in a way that, so the next person takes over, it's like, oh, we're going to get right back to the same way it has been to this point, it feels like. So it just felt like the show fell apart in the last half for some reason to me. And I think Rob said the same exact thing. I was like, yeah, it did. It was just like, it was great, and then all of a sudden, bloop, downward.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things that they're telegraphing so many things. It starts good. I mean, there's character moments, and you're saying to yourself, okay, this is what we've been missing. But then like I said, for the first half hour, and then it reverts back to what it was.
Basically, once you have to start getting back into the storyline that we're left with from originally, like all the stuff from there, that's when it starts to go downhill when it comes to the Tyler stuff and how Stamets is connected with it, you know, and he says the enemy is close, or whatever he says, or enemies here. When he kills Colbert, that's kind of about the point where the episode starts to go downhill, because I mean, that's where I felt like, oh, this is the end of this episode, because I thought this was going to leave it hanging. Yeah. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh shit, I've got like another 20-25 minutes left, you know? I was like, oh.
Yeah, they keep going and then they never address it. That like annoyed me. I don't really want to wait till next episode to have someone react to that. I like that character. I'm mad that his death scene's just like, bloop, who cares?
Nobody comes into sickbay for a stubbed toe or for a tetanus shot or something and finds the body.
To prod at Stamets.
Well, not only that, the entire crew is re-uniforming themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, at one point, wouldn't the medical crew come up and be like, okay, we got our... Where's Culver?
Hey.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh, man. And you know, actually, Dr. Culber is one of the few characters that actually I think is pretty well fleshed out. I mean, he is more than just a cardboard cutout.
Well, that's because we got to know him through the Stamets relationship and the relationship with how this thing affected Stamets and how their personal relationship was affected by it. So we actually got to know their character a little bit.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Lorca, and the same thing as far as what we know from Burnham, and the same thing we knew from Tilly. So at least the writers knew to take the characters that they already had some character out of, and they did utilize whatever other characters they could where they could as best they could. But then again, like we said, it was like we got a really great episode, but then the moment they had to start going back to the shit that was left over and getting us back into this storyline that we had to begin with is when it started going downhill. But you have to have like stories to where we can get to know this crew first before you get us into this long-term story, so we're invested in them.
Yeah.
Because there was no investment going into this, and I mean, I hated going from that high of like finally getting into the show to just being left back to where I was to begin with.
Yeah. They're not actually writing a story, they're just trying to connect dots, it seems like.
Well, and that's what we've said since the start, yeah.
I just want to know what was up with those 1930s Flash Gordon uniforms they were wearing. So.
Well, I think they're trying to try and conform it back to the original shows. Regardless, we know they're going to attempt to jump again at some point somehow, and they're going to wind up in the Prime universe. We've already called that. I think it's safe to say we're probably going to be right about that, considering all the other stuff that they've telegraphed. We've been about 99% right about so far, so...
Well, either that or the anomaly that they're looking for is going to bring them to the Prime universe. It's this weird thing that they give you bits and pieces of a good show, of a good story, and then they just louse it up toward the end.
They don't do a good job of tying things together. They just don't know how to finish an episode, I think, is the problem. In some ways, they're trying too hard to be dark and edgy and full of shock value, and that's always where it trips them up. The moments I find myself enjoying the show are when they're not doing that. When they're actually, like, spending time with the characters is when I'm having fun watching it, not when they're showing me Klingon sex or, you know, someone being, like, just brutally beaten to death. That's not really why I watch Star Trek. And I feel like when they give me the reasons I watch Star Trek, they don't do a terrible job. The stories aren't awful. The characters can be good when written well. They're just usually not. I think hopefully once they get done with this Klingon War storyline, which I'm just hoping to God doesn't last further than this season, maybe they'll get a little bit better then when they're actually discovering things.
They've actually said that the second season that they're going to get away from the Klingon War. But what that means, if they just go and do something dark and gritty again, then they're going to be right back in the same place where they are now. And it was written by Sean Cochran. I'm on the Memory Alpha page, and there's no other writing credits for Sean Cochran. It might be a pen name. I don't know. Let me just take a look. If you don't mind, let me just take a look.
If they did a pen name, it should have been Zephyrin Cochran, if we're being real.
Let me take a look at his other writing credits. Okay, he's Sean Cochran. He's written for TV series Revenge, a series called Off the Map, a series called Mercy, Off Duty, Lipstick Jungle, which I've never heard of, and he's written several episodes for Star Trek Discovery. He's written this past episode, Despite Yourself, credited as a staff writer for Into the Forest I Go, the CV's Passum Parabellum, staff writer, Magic to Make the Saddest Man Go Mad, staff writer, Lethe, staff writer. So he's credited as a staff writer, which means he's in the writing room. And it looks like this is the first episode he's written all by his lonesome. I can't say that it was a 100% bad episodes, but they need to find a way to get the best out of the writing staff, and so far they're not. Maybe they, I don't want to say maybe bring an outsider, but they, Mark Zicree, actually, Mr. Sci-Fi, he's a YouTube channel. He was saying about how you need to really pay attention to when you write Star Trek, and I think they need to bring in people that actually know Star Trek, because I don't see any other sci-fi credits on this guy's resume.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, I'm a Star Trek fan, but I wouldn't in my wildest dreams think about even trying to write a Star Trek show or an episode. To write something as nuanced and specific as Star Trek is, and especially when it's good Star Trek, is tough. It's tough to do. There is what? Over... I
think like 725.
Yeah, 700. Yeah, I know it's like, in that region there. So, needless to say, this stuff... There's a way of doing it right, and there's a way of doing it wrong, and then there's a way of doing it where you're just going to get, like you guys said before, shock value out of it. And that's what a lot of this is, and that's where it really gets me down, because it's like, that just goes against everything that Star Trek should and needs to be. You know, it's like you're really alienating the original audience in a lot of ways. You're alienating some of the newer audience, because younger viewers can't watch it now. As to where before Star Trek was something that could be shared with the family. Be like, hey, come watch this. Check this show out. You might like it.
I used to watch it with my parents growing up. That's how I became a Star Trek fan.
Yeah.
But now, if I had a young kid, I wouldn't be watching Discovery around them.
Oh, God, no. Also, just fun fact, I googled it and then did math. There are 718 episodes of Star Trek currently, including Discovery. Lots of episodes.
Plus movies, so, I mean...
And novels.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and this has been a complaint about Star Trek Discovery that we've had since the beginning. You took a very expansive universe, that's 718 episodes, and novels and the movies, and what you've done is you've actually shrunk it down now to one ship and one character, really.
They've gotten to a point with this where it's a lot like the schlocky slasher films of the mid-'80s and stuff like that, where they're really just so formalic to the point where the shock, it's like, oh, what can we do that's more shocking than the last one? Or we got to make sure we have this many kills and this many times. And that goes along with what you were saying, Rob, with we have to hit these points. It's like they're told by the producers, you have to have this, this, and that in the episode or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Otherwise, do whatever, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, you guys are familiar with the beat sheet, right?
Yeah.
Ren, you familiar with the beat sheet?
That's kind of what I'm referring to in a way, is the slasher movie beat sheet, but yeah.
Yeah, where you have an action for every minutes of action, every minutes of screen time,
you have to have X amount of boobs, you have to have X amount of kills, X amount of this,
This does feel very much like somebody's writing according to like the beat sheet. And like I said, it is reactionary. Ren, what do you think about it? What do you think? I mean, anything to add to Tom's?
No, I think that was really good analysis. I think where it loses itself is where it clearly tries to be something that Star Trek just isn't, where it tries to be basically, a gritty action show version of Star Trek. And so they seem to cram in all of these arbitrary action scenes and this arbitrary tension here and there where it doesn't actually make that much sense. And then it makes the episode feel messy and convoluted and over the top and ironically boring. You're not invested in the action, so the action just feels like it's wasting your time.
I will bring up actually one of my favorite episodes of TNG, and this is what I'm talking about. There's an episode called Drumhead.
I love that episode.
Yes, there is no action scenes at all in that episode. It's a court
trial.
It is a court trial, but that is the most compelling episode of Star Trek ever.
I found that episode interesting even as a child.
Oh my goodness. Picard's speech at the end.
It's iconic.
Yes. What he says, when the first link is forged, it forms a chain that could, first freedom censured, first speech impaired, it forms a chain that can irrevocably bind us all. I mean, and you just said, yes, that's great TV right there. That really is. That's great television. And like I said, the best episodes of Star Trek, the Next Generation, the original series, DS9, Voyager, have very little action, but they have those moments. You're hard pressed to find any of these moments in Discovery, and I really do feel like you're not embracing what Star Trek is. You're trying to run away from it. Then we have to bring up the Orville, and the Orville is saying to fans, "Look, we're Star Trek. We're everything you love. Please, you have a home with us." And you wonder why fans have responded to that. That's why.
Right, and well, some people will say, and in our defense right now, I have to say this. No, it has nothing to do with, it's got to be more like TNG or we won't be happy because Orville's just a TNG ripoff anyway. No, the point is this. There is a formula to Star Trek in a way, and I think you're bringing up a good point about the certain episodes where there isn't always a lot of action or, even just some of the fun episodes. To where those are the episodes where we get to know these characters and fall in love with them. So when the shit does hit the fan, we give a shit. Otherwise, we don't care because we have no moments with them. You have just so many great character moments that you could call back to at any given time just because of that. And then those are the reasons why you give a crap when those action scenes happen and the consequences that come of them. Otherwise, they have no weight whatsoever.
Yes.
You have this beautiful mundaneness sometimes in Next Gen that really makes you believe these characters live on this ship. And we just don't get that with Discovery.
We're really missing those character moments.
I totally
agree. We knew enough about Mud to know that they're fucking him.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did.
And Sarek and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's kind of annoying that Mudd is one of the more developed characters in the series so far, considering he's basically just a reference to the original series to pander to us because, they didn't want to pander to us by actually making a good show.
Yeah, there's subtle pandering. I mean, the doors open with the classic, squick, and they show a Constitution-class ship, and they make references to Captain Pike and Robert April, but it's the Cliff Notes version of Star Trek. It's the kid who's crammed all night for the midterm, and he learns just enough to get a C.
Yeah, well, we keep saying the same shit, yeah.
He knows enough to pass the test, but not enough to really tell you what anything means.
And as much as people like Jonathan Frakes brought to the show, like with this episode, it's unfortunately had to go down that road again, back to where we left off, like I said. So it's set up for the next person to come along and continue the shit, evidently. I'm not looking forward to any more of this, but we do have quite a few episodes to go, so...
I don't know. I have like the slightest hope that maybe it's just a really bad first season in the tradition of most Star Trek having a bad or mediocre first season, but I'm also not that optimistic because the problems just seem like the kind that are going to persist.
Well, Star Trek is not Game of Thrones. It's not The Walking Dead. You can't make it something it's not. And that's the biggest problem. I don't want to really do a rating because, like I said, it's kind of unfair to... you almost have to look at the whole season to really judge this episode of Star Trek Discovery. You almost have to judge the whole season. But how would you evaluate this episode? Would it be one of your favorites, least favorites? I mean, give your overall impressions, starting with Tom.
I think this episode showed us both the glaring problems that Discovery has overall and the potential that Discovery had overall in one kind of nice little encapsulation. Unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to put it.
Ren?
Yeah, overall, I thought this was probably one of my favorite episodes of the series so far. I definitely enjoyed it more than I've enjoyed some other episodes. I think that it's one of the first times we really get to see Michael Burnham characterized in a way that I think is true to the intention of the character they were trying to create, and I thought that she was really useful and effective in this episode, and yeah, the strong first half of this episode in particular really drew me in. And so I think, if we get more episodes that are more and more like this as we go on, maybe we'll eventually get to the point where we get enough of a ratio that we get a good show. It does make me a little bit more optimistic for the second half of this season, but I'm also not that optimistic because the second half of this episode wasn't that great.
Yeah. I'm of the frame of mind that it showed you potential, but unfortunately that potential didn't last. There were moments, there were glimmers of hope that this was going to turn a corner, but then it just rammed right first into a brick wall, like Wile E. Coyote. So.
It reminded me a lot of Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad, in that I enjoyed that episode and parts of that episode a lot, but I still thought there were glaring flaws and that other Star Trek has done similar things better.
And I think they were pointing out the biggest problem is consistency. They need to sit down. They need to write consistent episodes from start to finish. And I do think they need to get rid of the serialized format because that is the biggest anchor that's dragging this series down. All right. So anyway, with that, we've gotten a signal to pull into space dock, and we're going to be wrapping up the transmission here from the ready room.
But don't fret, there'll be more eventually.
Oh, there'll be more, and we still actually have the season finale of the Orville to recap. So we're gonna be having Ren back to talk about that with us as well. Isn't that right, Ren?
Yes, indeed. I am totally excited.
Yes, I'm really excited too. And we'd like to thank everyone here for joining us on Captain Robb's Trek Logs. We'd like to thank Lieutenant Commander Tom Connors.
Yeah, and so we'll definitely tackle the Orville on the next episode, and we'll also hopefully have another special guest along for that episode as well.
We'd like to also thank Commander Ren from Ren Rants. You can check her out over her own channel on YouTube, who is just fresh off the heels on her promotion.
Yes, indeed.
yes, you've gone up a whole pay grade. So
got my pips.
You get those cool epaulets now on the uniform. That'll be cool. So, yeah, but make sure you get that dry clean. You can't just put that in the wash. So
got to keep it sharp.
Yes. So
crisp.
Yes, I am, of course, your Captain Robb. Thank you for joining us once again. If you like what we do here at Midnight's Edge After Dark and the Trek Log, you can subscribe by clicking that bell icon. That way you'll be notified of all the latest content, and you can head over to Patreon and become a supporter. You'll receive all kinds of bonuses. Patreon supporters last time got early access to the animation and to the Trek Log. That was actually neat, and you can see Ren as an Andorian. So
it's a good look for me.
It is a good look for you. That was actually really good. And so, like I said, we have all kinds of bonuses, lost episodes, uncut audio, the behind the edge making of videos, all kinds of stuff. And as I always say, if you don't have the means to support us through Patreon, please click subscribe, click the bell icon, because we cannot do this without you. And we encourage you people to head over to Ren's channel and check her channel out. And she's got a lot of great content there, as always. Isn't that right, Ren?
Yes, indeed. I'll be doing an individual breakdown of the most recent episode of Star Trek Discovery, and that's probably going to be up tomorrow as well.
Awesome.
It'll probably be up by the time this is up.
True.
I'll put the link for that down below.
That's how the podcasting works. And we also like to thank special guest voice Dictor Van Doomcock. Be sure to check out his channel Overlord DVD on YouTube. It's got some great stuff for you. Once again, we'd like to thank you for joining us. We'd like to thank Tom Connors.
Thank you, Captain.
And we'd like to thank Ren for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.
And I am, of course, Captain Robb, and we will end transmission. We will catch you next time.